Eric, Premier Daniel Smith says Alberta will not raise the minimum wage because doing so would hurt youth employment. She also talked about the fact that Alberta is more affordable than other provinces, being that we only have a GST, no HST. Is this perhaps more about supporting small business owners?
I think that's one of the parts and reasons as to why the government is at least currently, keeping the minimum wage at the price that it is. I would also, strongly suggest, or from my perspective, that in addition to, wanting to support small businesses, is a lot of times we see youth make up a large percentage of, the individuals or workers who are, working at a minimum wage rate. And studies have shown us that, when, we analyze kind of unemployment rates and turnovers within the workplace, i.e. people resigning from different positions, we tend to see that more within youth workers, which is another reason I think why the government is not, investing as much in wanting to increase that minimum wage, is they're focusing on other job related statistics or other job related measures within the economy to help, boost things up, as opposed to just increasing the minimum wage, for the sake of it, or, to do things that other provinces are as well.
Now, many people would argue $15 an hour is simply not sustainable. I mean, so many are struggling. A recent report said for a city like Lethbridge, for instance, the living wage is closer to $17 an hour. Couldn't business owners maybe still have a healthy bottom line, even with a 50 cent or maybe a dollar an hour increase per employee?
It really comes down to each respective business to analyze their own bottom line, to analyze their own finances. So it might seem that, what's another $50 or 50 cents per hour or another dollar per hour increase? How much harm is that going to do, for businesses or companies? But I always remind people that a dollar that, a business has to spend, or additional dollar, cent, etc., on wages, salaries, means that's an additional dollar that comes from their bottom line that hinders their business operations, productivity, decisions, etc. So it's not always as easy as that solution. What I would say though is, it's certainly an option for businesses to consider. It's certainly, a time like this provides a tremendous opportunity for businesses to analyze their finances, to analyze, their workforce, see what expenses they could potentially, reduce or cut down on. But it's not a guaranteed solution, to help, with the, minimum wage that we're seeing right now.
Let's say a business owner decides to give their employees a 50 cent an hour raise or a dollar an hour raise. Could they potentially pass along the added expense to their consumers, their customers?
That's just it. If businesses are paying more for expenses, they have to recoup these costs in some form or another. So in other words, it's going to eventually, add up. It's going to eventually be paid by someone, whether it means, the businesses themselves, whether it means consumers. Somebody's going to be paying this additional, 50 cents per hour or dollar per hour. You're exactly right in that customers could be the ones, that experience this additional fee slash cost if minimum wages are increased or businesses decide, to pay their workers more on an hourly basis.
So, Eric, the combination of a wage freeze along with higher inflation drastically reduces the purchasing power of many people, does it not?
Absolutely. I speak the same concept, or I educate the same concept to my students, in econ and finance classes. Is This is what inflation is. It's the, general price increase in goods and services within the society. So it's something that, has occurred, will continue to occur. And it's a cost that, a lot of economists and government officials use as not the only, metric slash tool for determining the overall health and well-being of economies, businesses, etc. But it's certainly an important one. And it's certainly, a crucial statistic for all, entities within a society, businesses, government officials, consumers, day-to-day citizens, etc., to pay attention to and see, how much is this increasing, number one, and how is this going to impact the decisions that I make, on a personal basis, businesses make on a professional basis, because it's all, connected to, bottom line and finances at the end of the day.
I know a lot of people, Eric, at the same time are working 2 to 3 jobs to help support themselves and their families, but that takes a lot of time away from your family and your loved ones. And that really impacts a lot of people's quality of time with their family.
It's so true. And I heard something the other day that really stood out to me that I think further, enhances and further, or goes deeper to the great point you were just mentioning about how we're starting to see a shift within the economy, or the different types of work arrangements that exist. meaning there's going to be an increase in the gig economy, meaning instead of, individuals having one traditional, full-time job, perhaps they're working two different part-time jobs. Perhaps they're working as a part-time worker or independent contractor as opposed to regular, full-time status, seniority, benefits, etc. within an organization or company. I truly think in the next 5 to 10 years, it remains, to be determined to see exactly what's going to happen. But I strongly think that there's going to be more people having to work a couple of part-time jobs, working as independent contractors or temporary workers, depending on, what work arrangements are set up. Is again, employers are always having to manage their finances, manage expenses, and it's a lot easier for them, to just hire temporary workers, contract workers, etc., as opposed to providing, full-time employment with the benefits, salary, compensation, etc. I think this is something we're going to continue to see more of, which is, unfortunate for people's, personal lives, but also mental health and well-being as well.
With my kids and our own family, they have part-time jobs, and the tough part about that, no benefits, like you mentioned earlier. Now, Eric, could we see the UCP perhaps increasing minimum wage just before the next provincial election?
hmm There's a lot of different agenda items on the UCP's platform, a lot of different things that they're focusing on, the economy, employment, housing, other affordability areas as well. Ultimately, it's up to them. They're the ones that are going to know for sure as to, what their platform is going to look like, what's, the top priority, what's a middle priority versus maybe what's a bottom priority. So I would say, if there continues to be, the backlash and pushback that we're seeing amongst most of society and citizens, workers, etc., with the UCP currently not, increasing their minimum wage, I strongly suggest, or I strongly think that eventually UCP is going to have to listen more. We're going to eventually maybe, cave into, what's happening. Not a guarantee, there's other things that are on their platform, but from my educated perspective, I do think that they'll at least address this a little bit more. And this isn't the only time that we're going to see the UCP, discussing minimum wage. It's certainly something I think is going to be reassessed at a further date. And like you were saying, closer to, the next election.
Economics professor Eric Myers, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation this morning.